Welcome to the Sharkpreneur podcast with Kevin Harrington and Seth Greene. Kevin Harrington is the inventor of the infomercial, one of the original sharks from the hit TV show Shark Tank, and has generated over $5 billion in TV and digital direct response sales. Seth Greene is the world's first trusted authority on cutting-edge direct response marketing, a best-selling author, and the only 3-time Marketer of the Year nominee. On the podcast, Kevin and Seth interview sharkpreneurs who share straight talk on what it takes to explode your business.
Why do so many businesses struggle while others seem to explode overnight? Do you wish you had the secret to this type of exponential growth? Now, I've scaled more than 20 businesses to over $100 million, and it's not just luck. In my new book with Mark Tim, Mentor to Millions, you'll learn the repeatable framework I use in all my business ventures for massive success. Order at kevinmentor.com and get over $1,000 in bonuses. Head to kevinmentor.com.
Welcome to the podcast. This is your host, Seth Greene. Today I have the good fortune to be interviewing John Uustal, a founding partner of Kelley Uustal law firm in Fort Lauderdale. He leads a team of 14 elite trial lawyers who have won some of the largest verdicts in the country. I can't wait to dive in. John, thanks so much for joining us.
Absolutely. Glad to be here.
All right. Special thanks to financial advisor Robert Lehman, who connected us. So, John, what inspired you in the first place to go to law school?
Yeah, I don't have a story about something that happened when I was a kid, and I always wanted to be a lawyer. To be honest, I wasn't sure what I wanted to do after college. And some of my friends were taking the law school admissions test, and this sounds like I'm not sure this is the story I should tell to start, but I took the test and I got a perfect score. So I thought, oh, wow, maybe I'll be good at this lawyering thing.
Wait, was that the LSATs?
Yes, the LSAT.
So just for the heck of it, you took the LSATs, aced them, and said, I'll be a lawyer. Absolutely incredible. That is probably the most unique story I've heard. So
yeah, and you should know, it's not like I was killing it in undergrad. I took Russian for some reason. I wanted to study abroad. I thought I'll study in Russia, the evil empire, and go see what it was like over there. And I got really bad grades in Russian. I would take whatever class kind of caught my fancy. And so I didn't have a great GPA. And so anyway.
Well, apparently fate intervened and gave you a phenomenal score on the LSATs. After law school, you could have specialized in any area of law. How did you end up, doing so? I mean, you have won your successes have resulted in safer fuel tanks, safer seatbelts, better medical care, safer equipment for firefighters, some of the most complex and difficult legal cases of our time. How did you arrive at that as your area of specialization?
There's kind of like a pipeline if you do well in law school to the biggest and best firms. And certainly they have these phenomenal lawyers at these firms. But you start to realize that they represent the most powerful people in the biggest corporations. And who are they? Who's on the other side? And you have to really take a step back, because it's so easy to just go along. Oh, I want the highest paying job, and this is the hardest job to get. So if I get it, I have to take it. But if you take a step back, I don't think most people who go to law school just so they can make big companies richer by screwing little people who can't do anything about it. Right? Nobody gets up in the morning and say, oh, I wish I could screw $1.50 from every poor person, and then I'll be rich. It's just, but yet you end up, that's where you end up to some extent. I'm sure they do amazing things too at these firms, but they definitely maintain the status quo in things like, wage theft or whatever. You got to defend the big companies. So I was lucky enough. It's really hard to get a judicial clerkship out of law school with a federal judge, especially an appellate judge. And I was lucky enough to get one of those. And this judge, Judge Fay on the 11th Circuit U.S. Court of Appeal, was a very rare thing, which was he had been a trial lawyer. And by trial lawyer, I mean someone who represented real human beings. And And I listened to his stories and I thought, wow, that's what I want to do. That's who I want to be.
Awesome. So there's that was your inspiration at that point, but one doesn't necessarily just say, that's what I want to be, and then hang up a shingle and, take on the country of Argentina. So talk a little bit about kind of the evolution.
Yeah. So when I first, after my clerkship, I started looking for jobs with firms that were plaintiffs contingency firms, which is what he had done. So it's not always a physical injury, but someone gets hurt, they can't afford to pay a lawyer by the hour. So they find a lawyer who will say, I'll only get paid if I win. So I was looking at those kind of firms, and I got a job offer. People in that field knew my judge, and he had been one of the greatest trial lawyers ever. And so I got a job, and they were getting ready for a trial. It was about a year away, and this was probably one of the most fortuitous things in my life. They put me on the case to work it up. In hindsight, it's crazy that you'd put someone so young on such a big case. This was a family who was stopped at a toll booth in a station wagon, and they got hit from behind with a very light tap, and the car exploded, and there was something really bad going on at General Motors. And I worked up the case, and then we went to trial, and along with two more experienced lawyers, tried the case, but it was a 6-month trial. It was the longest trial in General Motors history, one of the longest trials in American history, one of the biggest verdicts ever. And it really did change how fuel systems were designed. Cars don't explode anymore in
that's a good thing. Thank you for that.
Yeah, that's a big thing. There were 1,000 people a year burning to death in car crashes, and they're not anymore. So, I mean, it just gives me chills even saying that.
I was gonna say, how does that make you feel to know that you were a part of saving so many lives?
It's hard to describe. It feels like you get up in the morning and you're going to do something that has meaning. It wasn't just me. I obviously right. There was hundreds of people. There were lawsuits before, and there were judges and juries and experts and people at General Motors, engineers who said this is what the standard should be, and got overruled by management but kept fighting. There were a lot of heroes, and I was just a little part of it, but it's still just so with everything bad going on, you can just take a deep breath and say, wow, I'm so glad I have the job I have.
That is absolutely incredible. And you have verdict after verdict and story after story. We don't have, I'm sure we could do this for hours and hours. We only have to, let's do a couple more. You were named Product Liability Lawyer of the Year. You were named Most Effective Lawyer for Product Liability. So we talked about safer fuel tanks. Talk about safer seatbelts.
So yeah, here's another crazy thing that I didn't know until, unfortunately, someone came to me and he was paralyzed, and he said I was wearing my seatbelt and it came loose in the crash. And I thought, how could that happen? That doesn't seem like it could happen. But I went to the scene, talked to some of the neighbors who lived near the scene. There were houses in the vicinity, and one guy came out and he's like, yeah, I remember the crash, and the seatbelt was hanging out the window. And I thought that's the oddest thing ever. So yeah, if the seatbelt was hanging out the window, it was, if it hadn't been worn, it wouldn't unspool during the crash. So I said, this guy must be right. And we worked on that case for a long time. And it turns out, I don't still have it. I still have this. I kept these all, this was years ago, but I still keep these seatbelts because we found out that if the seatbelt gets hit, and this was a pickup truck that kind of got hit from the side and the car went under it. And if the seatbelt stalk gets a shock from the bottom, if I drop this seatbelt right now and onto the floor, when it hits here, this will pop out. So there's a latch that is vulnerable to a certain vertical force. And people knew that, in the industry. So European designs had what's called the lock for the latch. Costs about 10 cents. Well, a lot of seatbelts didn't have locks for the latch, but because of litigation, they do now.
That is absolutely incredible. And then you were threatened in Argentina because you were, talk a little bit about the case and what Argentina's dirty war was and what part you played.
So the cases that I had were brought in the United States on behalf of Argentine victims. And the short story is that there was a blood medicine that was made from blood. It was for hemophiliacs, and it had been recalled in the United States because it was contaminated with a virus, a deadly virus. And just the very, very short version is, after the recall, after it was stopped being sold in the US, some companies didn't want to take the loss of destroying it, so they sold it in South America, particularly Argentina. So we brought suit for some of the victims in the United. I should pause and just say, wow, right? Can you believe a human being would do that to another human being? But anyway, those companies did. So we brought suit in the United States, and the reason we sued in the United States instead of Argentina was Argentina had a different legal system, and there was no way to sue an American company in Argentina because they didn't reside there, and that's not where they acted. So that was the law, not to mention that the practicalities would make it impossible. So we brought suit here, and the defendants said, oh no, that's not true. That's not the law. You can bring suit in Argentina, and it's practical to do so. So they had some experts who I deposed saying, that's not true. You're making this up. The law in Argentina is very clear. And so some of those experts were judges who had been appointed a decade earlier during Argentina's what they call the dirty war. So a military junta took over, citizens were tortured, they would be taken from their schools. Some of them were high school students, college students, anyone who might be seen as pro-trade union or pro-worker, and they would be pulled out of their classroom or their house in the middle of the night, tortured, brought in a plane. They fly the plane out over the ocean and throw them alive out of the plane into the ocean. It was a really horrible thing. And people who collaborated with the junta, I thought that was relevant to say who these, maybe they'd be collaborating with American companies in terms of making something up in order to get away with it. Anyway, I know this story is long, but you have to know all that to know when I was asking some of those questions and really pressing hard about this. My co-counsel, who was Argentine, said to me, this is not a movie and this is not America. You need to leave. And I still didn't get it. I thought that's crazy, but I got up and he ended the deposition, and I went to, there was a couple more things that were more blatant threats. And I went to the airport, went home, no problem. I thought these guys are crazy. The next time I went back, on the way back to the airport, I almost got kidnapped. So I haven't been back since.
I can imagine why. Wow. So who do you want to play you in the movie?
Daniel Craig. Why not pick? No. I wish there was a movie about stuff like this, because I don't think most people understand how much control big companies have about over their day-to-day lives, and how dangerous it is. People don't see the effects of a lot of these corporate decisions, mangled bodies and burnt people. And so, yeah, I hope there is a movie.
How do clients find you now?
Usually they find some lawyer they know, and that lawyer says, okay, this is something we need, someone who's willing to go to war. It's a different kind of practice than the vast majority of lawyers. So most lawyers will say, okay.
Right. I mean, you've got elements of both product liability and mass tort almost, right?
Yeah. Yeah. And we do some traditional, my firm does some traditional product liability, some traditional mass tort, but just like you said, sometimes there's that you've got the worst of both worlds. I mean, the worst of both worlds from a business perspective,
Yes.
or like, yeah.
With all the success you've had, I mean, you won every case against big tobacco. What's your biggest challenge now?
Well, when that first trial, when I was right out of law school, where, you know, it had a real effect on the world. There was a big verdict. The clients won their case, and then there was a change in the design of fuel systems. Gradually over the years, it's become much harder. I think the system is much more difficult to make that kind of change. In my opinion, I'll just give you an example. My last big result, and I am right now very proud of it, because it was a little girl. It was a defective pressure cooker. There was a cover up. They almost got away with it. It was like a devious cover up. Other lawyers wouldn't touch it. And we proved it, and we changed this little girl's life. You know, she was disfigured from burns. She had amputations on all 4 limbs. And so she would have had a really hellish life if we hadn't come through for her. And we did. But no recall, right? The government agency still hasn't gotten around to the investigation. They're so backlogged. And the incident happened 5 years ago now. I couldn't take the risk of going to verdict and getting the press that would have maybe necessitated the recall, because this little girl, once I got them to a settlement amount that would have changed her life, we had to settle. But basically, those pressure cookers are still out there. And so the biggest challenge is, I think, people, and I'm sure there's some truth to this, that some people are taking advantage of the system with frivolous lawsuits. And so I'm the biggest supporter of whatever you can do to end frivolous lawsuits. But I just don't want people to confuse frivolous lawsuits and righteous lawsuits. And that the confusion, I think, is intentional. The big companies try to confuse those issues, talk about frivolous lawsuits, but then put caps on righteous lawsuits, so we can never really be harmed when we do bad things. So that's the biggest challenge, making a difference. It's a lot harder these days.
Your passion is obvious. What do you like best about what you're doing?
Well, when you have a client and you're losing sleep because you have to win, and then you come through, and you get to tell them, we won, you won. That's probably the best. Those are the best days.
I bet. For our folks who are watching or listening and want to learn more, where is the best place for us to send them?
I'm writing a book called Corporate Serial Killers. So I have a website, johnuustal.com.
That's a great title.
Isn't it?
Do you have a publisher?
Yeah, not yet.
I would like to toss our hat in the ring. We need to have a separate conversation about that.
All right. Yeah, I have a proposal. I'm ready to go, but I've been holding off because I want to be far enough along in the book that I'll meet my publishing deadline.
Okay. And I'm sorry, the website is John Uustal, UUSTAL.com.
Yes.
Yes. I'm on it. Corporate crime fighter, lawyer, author.
Yes.
Corporate crime fighter is a great you need like a superhero outfit. You go as yourself for Halloween. That is awesome. Well, John, we greatly appreciate your time. It's been both entertaining, educational, and scary. Thank you so much for what you do and who you are. For our folks who are watching or listening, go check out johnuustal.com. We'll put the link in the show notes. John, thanks again for your time.
Absolutely. It was a pleasure.
Thank you, everybody, for watching or listening. Thank you, Robert Lehman, for the amazing introduction, and we will talk to you or see you all next time.
Do you need money to fund your idea, product, or service? Are you ready to take your business to the next level but need capital to get it done? Kevin Harrington has heard more than 50,000 pitches and knows how to help you make the perfect pitch to get the funding for your entrepreneurial dream. He's distilled the process down in his perfect pitch cheat sheet, and it's yours for free. Just text PITCH to him right now at 727-888-2100. Text PITCH to 727-888-2100 right now and claim your free perfect pitch cheat sheet. Text PITCH to 727-888-2100 to start funding your dream today.
This show has been produced by Market Domination, LLC. To discover how you can have your own show completely done for you and turn it into a real published book and become the authority in your marketplace, go to www.marketdominationllc.com/podcast offer.